Hey guys, what's going on? It's Dan, and I am joined today by Sam Wakeman. How are you doing today, Sam?
I'm pretty good. How about you?
I'm doing well myself. So, Legends Arceus dropped earlier today, and we're just going to be taking a look at some of the new Pokemon and new forms to analyze how they might do in draft formats as opposed to the typical analysis of just standard VGC formats, and look for some pretty comparable Pokemon to them as well, and how we think they might fit into various different metagames. So, without any further ado, we're just going to go ahead and dive right on in. The first new Pokemon we want to look at is Ursaluna, which is a normal ground type with the abilities Guts, Bulletproof, and Unnerve. As you can tell by its moveset, it's got a lot of coverage. Headlong Rush is a new move that is a base 100 power, base 100 accuracy ground type move that lowers defenses, so it's pretty similar to Close Combat in that regard. But Ursaluna's got massive coverage, and then over on its stats, we see a very sizable HP and attack that can be boosted by Guts, and then respectable defenses. Special defense is a bit low, but the HP really compensates for that a lot, and I could see this thing running Assault Fist when it's not running the Flame Orb Gut sets. But what are your thoughts on Ursaluna, Sam?
Yeah, I think this mon looks really promising. Obviously, we're talking about these mons in like the context of current formats, so because we have no idea when these will be available,
Mm-hmm.
so just keep that in mind. But yeah, I think this mon could be really cool. I think having that crazy coverage along with base 140 attack and guts is like crazy. Um, And then, like, not to mention the fact that it can just max Quake and raise its SPDF as well. Um, yeah, I really like the look of this thing. I mean, obviously, the special defense is a problem, and you're probably gonna have to build around it sometimes. But with Dynamax and 130 base HP, I don't think it's gonna be a huge issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And for a similar comp, we actually have Conkeldurr, which is another Pokemon with 140 attack with the option to run Gut sets, and a sort of lackluster special defense. Ursaluna's a little bit bulkier. The speed tiers are pretty similar, but Conkeldurr's going to work a bit better under Trick Room. And in secondary abilities, if you're not running the Flame Orb sets, Conkeldurr's Iron Fist is going to boost its attack, whereas Ursaluna's Unnerve is going to make your super effective moves hit more. So I think they're pretty similar, and I could see teams where one or the other works better, but I don't think one is strictly better than the other in this sense. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I think there's, obviously differences. Like, I think Ursaluna probably generally wants to max a little more than Conkeldurr. I think,
Mm-hmm.
with Conkeldurr's, like, ability to run, like, Iron Fist, Mach Punch stuff, it can kind of be, like, a good non-max option, whereas Ursaluna is definitely not limited to only Dynamaxing, but it definitely seems like a mon that you would draft with at least you're probably going to be maxing this a lot. I think Unnerve is a great ability for it too because Shuka Berry is, in my experience, is so commonly run in draft.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think an Unnerve ground type. Do we have a ground type with Unnerve?
I don't believe so. I think the closest we have is Aerodactyl, which is a rock flying type.
We do not have any. Yeah, so that I think that's pretty cool. You can see some issues with like uh, if you're running Ursaluna under Trick Room and you want to max Strike, then you're going to make your opponent faster under Trick Room. But realistically, with the coverage this thing has, it really doesn't need to run a normal move. I don't think.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well,
Like I think,
what was
yeah.
that?
I was just gonna say, I think like ground move plus like two coverage moves and protect is like a pretty good set for this thing.
Yeah, I think it's going to have a lot of flexibility and could definitely be viable in a lot of draft formats to fit a lot of teams. But moving on, I'm going to let you handle the Basculegions because I know you've got some personal affinity for these Pokemon.
Yeah. So for anyone who doesn't know, I'm a huge fan of the designs of these Pokemon ever since they got released. I really like it. But so there's a male and a female form for Basculation. We'll cover the male one first here. It's Water Ghost type. It has Rattle, Adaptability, and Mold Breaker as its abilities. Now, the move pool is pretty limited. You can see here, I pretty much only included physical moves because it's mainly going to want to be running physical attacks with its base 112 attack stat. Um, Keep in mind, that these mons will likely get a lot more moves, because I think it's something like only 180 moves in this game or something, versus the hundreds that are actually available like in like all of Pokemon. So this thing could, you know, maybe get things like Poltergeist. I don't know if like Phantom Force is in. I don't think Phantom Force is in here. So it could get Phantom Force. Really, like any physical Ghost Stab would be amazing for this mon. As you can see, it's got a pretty middling speed here, but 120 HP with 65 defense and 75 SpDef is like pretty respectable bulk. And 112 attack might look lackluster, but running it with adaptability means like you're going to be firing off some really powerful Aqua Jets and stuff. It does get Wave Crash. It's a signature move. It's base 75 physical water type move with 100 accuracy, and it damages the user for a third of the inflicted damage and raises the user's action speed, which may translate to speed. We don't know how these are all going to translate, but a pretty good comparison. Or sorry, what do you think about this one, Dan?
Well, actually, I think we can move into the comparison with the Crawdaunt here.
Yeah.
Crawdaunt is another option where you see a really high attack stat, you see that adaptability, you think really hard-hitting Aqua Jets, but it just doesn't all come together. Now, I think Basculegion-M has a better chance of all coming together because it's got that additional bulk. Crawdaunt is made out of paper, whereas Basculegion obviously isn't, and it's got a bit more speed, so you've got a bit more wiggle room to do something like a Choice Scarf. For example, Choice Scarf Basculegion can outspeed base 130s, whereas Choice Scarf Crawdaunt can't. So I see this as a favorable comparison for Basculegion, because Crawdaunt has a very small niche in draft, but I think Basculegion can carve out a much larger one.
Yeah, for sure. I think also, I guess I didn't even say this before, but I think Mold Breaker is also really cool. You know, maybe not like, it'd be really cool if it got if it gets ground type coverage, although it kind of seems unlikely. But even then, like firing off like a ghost move into a Mimikyu or things like that, I think it could still get some cool stuff there. It can ignore Storm Drain too, which is really cool. Yeah, so actually, yeah, it does make pretty good use of that ability. But yeah, I think it definitely is, assuming, really, I think all it's going to really need is, like, if it gets a good physical ghost move, I think it's probably considerably better than Crawdaunt.
Yeah, I can absolutely agree with that, even without that. I think I agree with that. But why don't you tell me a bit of the differences between the two forms here?
Yeah, so the female form, it's actually, I think it's really interesting how they, like, differentiated these forms. So the male form had that base 112 attack stat, and I think base 80 special attack. So what they did here was they didn't quite switch them. They kind of leveled them out a little bit. So base 100 special attack, but 92 attack as well. This thing gets really great coverage and stuff like Shadow Ball, Hex, Ice Beam, Psychic. I think it got Water Pulse, and I didn't put it on there, but that would be, like, at least in this game, like the special type Water Stab you would probably run. Which, you know, base 100 special attack with adaptability is still pretty good. Bulk and speed are the same. I definitely wish I kind of wish they would have just gone with the 112 special attack. Because I still don't think you're really running physical sets on this very much. Maybe you run like Aqua Jet, if you need priority. But it gets the same abilities. I don't think they'll probably be run super differently.
Yeah, I can agree with that. And you can see with the comp here, this one was a much harder one to come up with, but we've put Dragalge down, which is another adaptability option, this time on the special side. If you think Dragalge under Trick Room, you know how hard this thing hits, and that's with a base 97 special attack. So Basculegion female, even though these stats may seem lackluster, can actually hit you harder than Dragalge can with its stab moves, you know, if they're maxed. So I think that even though its stats look lackluster, you can't forget what adaptability can offer to a Pokemon.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think as well, like, the 78 speed tier is obviously, like, not a speed tier you would, like, write home about, but I do think Uh, it's like you said, it puts it at a good Scarf speed tier. It puts it at a good Tailwind speed tier. Whereas, I guess 44 is pretty good under Trick Room. But
Hmm.
I was also gonna say like the bulk is honestly pretty comparable here. Like obviously, Dragalge has a lot more special defense, but like Basculegion's HP stat is almost twice as high.
Right.
Um, so I think you're probably going to be living a lot of similar attacks, if I would have to guess.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. But moving on to the next one, I'm going to talk a little bit about Hisuian Decidueye, which is a grass fighting type. The Hisuian starters have the exact same abilities with Overgrow and Long Reach. And then if you look at its
Sad.
moves, you'll see triple arrows, which, if I'm remembering correctly, is the signature move that will lower the opponent's defenses while dealing base 60 power damage. So it's got
It's
some
50 power,
50 power. Okay, 50 power. So
and
it's got some. Yeah,
it
go for
also
it.
increases its crit chance for later hits, is what it says here.
Yeah. So it's got a lot of sort of latent power ability that it can hit with. I'm not 100% sold on this Pokemon though. For example, I'm going to let you talk a little bit about it on this next slide, but if you look at base Decidueye here, you'll see that the stats are pretty similar. It's a bit more aggressive, but I don't know. Grass fighting just seems like such a weak typing. Its stats are a little lackluster. It's got maybe the worst speed stat in draft. Why don't you tell me just a little bit about your thoughts on this Hisuian Decidueye?
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you. I think, well, like, Decidueye is like a decent mon in draft, right? Like, it's usually like middle tier-ish.
Hmm.
Um, I think, like, I don't know. The offenses are only like 5 different. Like, they took 5 out of Decidueye's special attack and put it into attack. But, like, personally, I would honestly, like, well, one, I think Grass Ghost is probably a little bit of a better offensive pairing. It's definitely a better defensive typing. But, I think having that option to run special is pretty good. From the looks of Decidueye, the Hisuian form's current move pool, it gets like no special moves, um, which makes sense since it's a fighting type, But I think having the option to run physical or special on Decidueye is a lot better. Like I honestly just can't really see many situations where I would take Hisuian over the base form.
Yeah, I can agree with that as well. This Decidueye just doesn't fully click for me. Like, its speed isn't helping it, and it doesn't have the stats overall to make up for it, which is why we have our comparison. The worst of the Lycanroc forms, Lycanroc Midnight, which is another thing that, you know, looks like it's decent in a bunch of different areas, but doesn't excel anywhere, and just ends up being generally weaker in draft than you'd think it would be. Like, I think Decidueye's got a bit more upside to it because you've got the signature move, but I don't know. I just don't see it comparing exceptionally favorably to this Lycanroc, and this Lycanroc doesn't see a lot of play even in draft currently.
Yeah, this Lycanroc is terrible. Yeah, my main thing too is like it doesn't. I mean, again, it might in future games, but close combat got a lot more distribution even in this game, and it doesn't get it right now. So again, there's no guarantee. Like we can't make any guarantees on move pools.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I wish it got close combat. I guess because base 112 attack is like not that high. I mean, it's fine. Like it's not awful, but it's definitely like on the lower end of like what you would consider an offensive mon. And I wish it got. I don't know. I just close combat is just such a good move, and it like makes up for mons with bad base offenses.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
Also, I do want to correct myself. It does get like Leaf Storm and Aura Sphere and stuff. So correction there, but go ahead.
yeah. I mean, I just think it's the most lackluster of the three starters, but
Uh,
I also think it's the most lackluster of the grass fighting types. But I think you agree with me there. So why don't you just walk me a little bit through what this Lilligant can do? Because this thing looks like a monster.
Yeah, so this Lilligant is looking pretty cool in my opinion. So it's a grass fighting type, which, as we said before, not an amazing typing, at least in my opinion. Chlorophyll, Hustle, and Leaf Guard are the abilities. Um, as you can see, it gets some pretty good uh, physical stab options, and as well as some stuff like Poison Jab and Aerial Ace. However, its signature move, um, Victory Dance, and again, this is another one that will probably get changed in translation. But it says it raises the user's offensive and defensive stats and increases the damage dealt by the user's moves by 50%. I have no idea how that's going to translate to like a mainline game, because those mechanics, it's all talking about like Legends Arceus mechanics. Um, but if it's anything close to how broken that sounds, I think it'll be really good. Um, Obviously, Chlorophyll is a fantastic ability to have, but Hustle, if it's in a max format, like it has base 105 speed over the base form Lilligant, which has 90, so you could actually viably run this out of Sun a lot more. Um, and it gets Airstream with Aerial Ace, close combat. Like I really am. I'm pretty high on this mon. I think it's going to be really good.
Yeah, I'm also high on it, especially if you compare it to normal Lilligant, which is another Sun
Yes.
abuser. But they do completely different roles. Normal Lilligant, even though it's got a higher single attacking stack with that special attack, is mostly a support option, whereas this Lilligant, I think, has the potential to have the best setup move in the game, depending on the translation of Victory Dance, which is why I'm going to compare it more favorably to Venusaur, which is something else that you look at the special attack, you're not blown out of the water, but it's all the things that it can also do in Sun and being the fastest thing on the field. Lilligant also has the sleep powder like the Venusaur does. It also has the moves that can hit as hard as Venusaur can, and most importantly, Victory Dance might let it hit even harder. Now, I'm not saying Lilligant is as good as Venusaur, because the typing is considerably worse, but I'm just saying it's not the worst comparison in the world to make.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, Venu's great in draft, especially if you take out, if you know, I guess it's the part of the reason that Venusaur is so good is the G-Max move with the residual damage. So if you kind of take that out of the comparison, since obviously Lilligant doesn't have something like that, which is a factor, but I think they I like this so much better than the base Lilligant, because I mean, obviously they're performing different roles, and Lilligant and the base Lilligant is kind of one of those like tier 3, tier 4 Sun abusers where like you're not really killing anything with it, but you're gonna like spam sleep or after you. I also think like I just like the fact that you don't have to run this thing in Sun. Like if it's usable in a max format at some point, like maxing with Hustle is not an awful place to be in. I don't think. And like Venu obviously can function under Sun, but like you're not drafting it if you don't have Sun, and you're probably not drafting Lilligant if you don't have Sun either. But you can like bring it on teams without your Sun setter, and I think it's probably going to do okay.
Yeah, I can agree with that. But let's go ahead and move on, and I'm going to talk about Samurott. The Hisuian Samurott is probably the Pokemon that's grown the most on me going through this process. So it's a Water Dark type with Torrent and Shell Armor, Night Slash, Aqua Jet, Ceaseless Edge, Sword Dance, Dark Pulse, Hydro Pump, Poison Jab, Psycho Cut, Ice Beam, X Scissors, Aerial Ace. It's got a lot of coverage, a lot of potential max moves, including Airstream. But Ceaseless Edge, which is its signature move, it's a pretty low power move that can hit normally, but it also has a damage over time effect. And that damage over time effect could be really, really useful. Like we see the G-Max forms of the Kanto starters and Colossal, what that does. This doesn't even need to max to have it, if that translates over. And although its stats are middling all around, I think it's got a little bit of potential, and this one was really weird for me to try and figure out what it could or could not be. What are your thoughts on this Samurott?
Well, I really like that. I mean, the stats are very similar to base Samurott, but I like that it has another stab. I like that, which to me, like having that extra stab option makes it, because like I think the one of the things with Samurott, and we haven't really seen it in like a recent format really, but I think one of the things with Samurott is none of its stats are great, but none of them are like terrible. So, kind of like maybe using it to like hit some stuff and like kind of just like sit there. But I think this new Samurott is really interesting because it has dual stab, and I think Water Dark is a really good offensive typing, or offensive typing, and it gets good coverage. It gets like Ice Beam. I think does it get Icy Wind? Uh, to go back to that
Let's
last
see.
time.
Yeah, I don't see Icy Wind on
I
it.
don't. I probably would have. Yeah, I think I would have put it on there.
I
But
don't know
like,
if is Icy
just
Wind
like
in the game.
it is. Yeah.
Okay.
But I mean, even stuff like Swords Dance, Aqua Jet. I don't think the original Samurott got Aqua Jet. I could be wrong, but like Swords Dance, Aqua Jet stuff is really cool. I think. Yeah, I'm. It's not going to be like super busted, but I think it'll have some usage.
Yeah, I can agree with that. And we picked Obstagoon as a comp for it, not so much for the support sets that Obstagoon can have, but for the sort of stat spread and the offensive potential for it. Obstagoon can be run offensively, and Samurott can obviously be as well. I don't think this is the best comparison in the world, but I think Samurott's a sort of a unique mon with its stats and move pool in the role that it's going to fill. It's going to be a sort of like a mid-speed threat under the right form of speed control, but it does compare favorably, at least offensively, to Obstagoon, which I think is always an underused Pokemon in draft. So I think Samurott could do some stuff.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. It's not going to be crazy, I don't think, but it'll definitely see some play.
Yeah, it's not defaulting into trash tier, which is what I thought the first was as I started looking at it. And then the last of the new starters, we have Typhlosion. Why don't you walk me through Ghosty Boy?
Alright, so this is Hisuian Typhlosion. It adds the Ghost typing to base Typhlosion, so it's Fire Ghost. Same abilities in Blaze as Flash Fire, which, Flash Fire is decent. Not the greatest, but also not bad. The move pool is pretty tame. It gets decent options for both Fire and Ghost, but it doesn't get much more than that, which is better than base Typhlosion, because base Typhlosion basically only gets Fire moves. But I think these are really great options. Infernal Parade is a base 60 special Ghost type move that can leave the target with a burn, and the power is double if the target has a status condition, which I think that's pretty cool, given it also gets Hex, which is kind of strange, but it's slightly weaker. It's weaker than Hex by 5 base power, but it can burn, which sets up for itself to double damage. I also think Calm Mind is probably pretty decent on this. As you can see, the base 119 special attack, I mean, it's not phenomenal, but it's not, like, terrible either. I definitely think, this thing probably needs a little more coverage, in my opinion. What are your thoughts on this one, Dan?
Yeah, I think it's definitely missing the coverage. We've only put Ghost and Fire type moves under its notable moves, except for Calm Mind, which is the setup move. So it's got a decent speed, it's got a pretty good special attack, but I wouldn't say world breaking, and not much bulk at all. This thing screams, again, mid-tier to me with some upside. I mean, let's just compare it to what its normal form looks like. It's a little slower and a little stronger. That's not a trade-off I would normally take. There's a huge difference in what it can outspeed or speed type base 100 compared to base 95, and I think that's really going to hurt this Pokemon.
Yeah, I agree. I just checked to make sure I didn't miss any moves. Literally, it gets Ghost, Fire, and normal special moves, and that's it. So, again, it'll probably get a couple more, but given that normal Typhlosion doesn't get very much, it doesn't bode super well for this one either, in my opinion. Yeah, I don't have a ton to say about this one. I agree with you. I think I would rather have base 105 speed or base 100 speed than 95 and a little stronger. But
Yeah, and then if we look at another Ghost and Fire type, we've got Chandelure here, which is slower, so Typhlosion does have that on it, but it hits so much harder, and it's got, the utility that Chandelure can have, namely stuff like Trick Room and Imprison. So I just think Typhlosion's going to struggle to find the niche where it's the best at its thing, which is fine for it in draft because it can be in a lower tier than other things and just be the best value for its thing that it can do in that tier. But I see it struggling to maintain a consistent, relevant foothold in the metagame.
Yeah, I was also gonna say in the world where this and Typhlosion are both forms are available, I think a major difference too is this form, Eruption is in this game, and base Typhlosion gets it, and this one doesn't. So I don't know that that'll stay that way, but I would kind of suspect it, since it definitely seems like a conscious effort on their part to not give this thing Eruption. Which is a little concerning to me, because Eruption's kind of one of the only reasons you would run normal Typhlosion, or at least like the big draw to it. So that concerns me a little bit, like not having that option. But yeah, I don't know. It's definitely lackluster to me.
Yeah, I can agree with that. But let's move on, and why don't you tell me, speaking of lackluster, a little bit about this Electrode?
So this is Hisuian Electrode. It's electric grass typing. It gets Soundproof, Static, and Aftermath, which are the same abilities as base Electrode. It has the exact same base stats as base Electrode. And as you can see, it doesn't learn very many moves. It gets electric moves, and it gets grass moves, like attacks, and it gets Thunder Wave, and then it gets a bunch of useless stuff that we would never run. Thunder Wave, I guess, is cool on a base 150 mon, like it's gonna outspeed pretty much. I mean, there's only like 2 mons faster than it in like the current format, right? Alecki and Faramosa. So, I mean, obviously it's great to have that speed stat, but if you have no moves, it's just kind of pointless.
Yeah, let's show a pretty negative comparison to it, and that's Jolteon. Jolteon hits harder. It's a bit slower, that's true, but it's still fast enough to get the job done, and it has better move pulls. I also thought about putting Regieleki here, but that just was so much sadder. So, this Electrode is pretty actively bad. Like, can some team draft it and do decently with it? Yeah, but they're going to be able to get it at rock bottom prices.
I would honestly, it has the exact same stats and abilities as base Electrode. There are probably a lot of times where I might just prefer base Electrode, since it only has one weakness. I don't know. Like this mon, I mean, I guess they're both so frail that, I don't know that it matters that much, and I guess if you need the grass typing, it's there, but, I don't know. If I'm a bulky water, I'm not scared of this thing at all. I'm just gonna Ice Beam it and 2-hit, and, maybe Oko it, I don't know. I just can't. If it gets something cool like Electro Web or something, then that would be amazing. I think if you give this thing Electro Web, it's, instantly, a whole tier higher.
It's still not good.
But, no, it's still definitely not good. But at least it would give it, a reason to use it over something like Jolteon, right? It has a speed control option. But as it stands right now, it just kind of does nothing.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
It does nothing really quickly, but it's still nothing.
Yeah. But let's talk about something that I think has grown on me a lot, is this Hisuian Braviary. It's a Psychic Flying type with Defiant, which doesn't seem like a hugely important thing for it, but it's probably decent. But more importantly, Sheer Force. Because Sheer Force Psychic is going to do a whole lot of damage. Sheer Force Air Slash, Sheer Force Hurricane. This thing's going to be a tank buster. It's going to be able to take down a lot of things. It's pretty bulky with its HP stat. And its speed is not great. But if you put some speed control around this thing, it is going to hit like a truck.
Yeah, I'm really optimistic about this mon. It's kind of hard to judge for me. It'll probably get stuff like Tailwind, but this is probably one of those mons that gets Tailwind that you probably don't want to use Tailwind super often. But just looking at the coverage it has now, Asper Wing is its new move, and it's I just had it up and then I clicked away.
It recovers HP,
Uh,
right?
um, it says it's base 75 and a 90 accuracy. It raises the user's action speed and has a heightened crit chance. But we don't know the typing yet. It's probably psychic, I would have to guess. Um, oh, it's either psychic or flying, I guess. But
It is psychic, I believe.
oh, it is okay. The sheet I'm looking at has question marks, but psychic would make sense. I don't know that you use that. I guess getting +1 speed is cool. Um, I think a psychic flying type getting mystical fire I think is pretty nice because both its stabs are going to be resisted by steel. Um, but yeah, I mean, nothing. I don't really have a ton more to say about this than what you said. I think, like we like Nidoking hits Calx, and that thing has base 85 special attack. This thing has 112 special attack. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's the comp we picked for it, is the Nidoking. It doesn't really compare at all to its base form Braviary, so I just skipped through that really quickly. But
Yeah,
I think if you look at Nidoking and people are like, this is a decent, mid to slightly above mid-tier Pokemon that doesn't have max pressure, it's going to do a lot of damage. This thing's going to do 40% more damage, and
yep.
it's going to have a bit worse coverage, but man, it's going to hurt, which is why I like it. But why don't you walk us through just Sneasel and how it compares to the current Sneasel form?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting one to me. I'm very glad. Oh, so it's poison fighting type now instead of dark and ice. Which not a great typing, but offensively it's decent. Um, a couple of main differences, I think. It has the same stats as base Sneasel, and it still keeps inner focus, which is really good. You're running inner focus on this thing 100% of the time. Fake out is not in this game, but it's pretty safe to say this will get fake out. Um, I think having close combat on this Mon is really cool to me because, like, base Sneasel, I mean, it's got 95 attack, but it's not doing crazy damage because it's what its stab moves are like what, Throat Chop and does it
Triple
get
Axle.
Icicle Crash?
Triple
Triple
Axle.
Axle, yeah. Yeah, which is like, that's good. But I feel like having close combat is really nice. It keeps Snarl, which I think is really cool for it. You'd think maybe losing Dark type it might lose Snarl, but it keeps Snarl. To me, the real like potential with this mon comes in what moves it could get. Um, Adding the fighting type adds a lot of like support options to it. If this thing gets coaching, it could be nuts. I think it could be like a really cool, like maybe tier 3, tier 4, probably. If it got coaching, it's probably going to be pretty comparable, if not maybe better than base Sneasel. Um, yeah, I'm really optimistic about this mon. It could also get things like Quick Guard, which could be cool too. What do you think of this one, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, I think it just comes down to what move pool it ends up getting compared to base Sneasel, because it's going to be fast inner focus user that has a decent support pool, and that's going to be its primary role, like our current Sneasel. But unlike Sneasel's current evolution, Weavile, we've got, you can see it's got the exact same stats, but we've got Sneasler, which is a fighting poison type, which looks like one of the sloths from Ice Age. But it has a similar move pool to the Sneasel we just discussed. It doesn't keep inner focus anymore, but it's got 120 speed and 130 attack. I mean, it hits pretty hard. It can buff itself a bit, so this thing's gonna be a decent sweeper, but it's less than 130 speed. 130 is sort of the baseline for what I think of like a fast Pokemon that can come in without any speed control and generally outspeed everything around it. It's 130. 120 doesn't quite hit that, so I gotta ding this thing a little bit for it right there. And also, we don't know what its support move pool is going to be like, but what do you think of Sneasler?
Yeah, so I definitely think it's cool. Like, I wish. I know that they were following the same formula as the original Sneasel to Weavile, but I wish this thing could have kept inner focus. That being said, I think the main concern I would run into is the same as base Sneasel and Weavile. Like, if I need a support role, I'm taking Sneasel every time because it has inner focus. Um, And now the base speed difference is even lower at only 5 difference instead of 10. And I don't think 115 to 120 is that consequential of a difference. Um, but you know, I mean, it's gonna do damage. Like base 130 attack with close combat is gonna hit like a truck. But like you said, I think it's similar to Sneasel. I think it's gonna depend on if it gets, maybe stuff like I think Quick Guard could be pretty cool on this one. It's gonna be one of the faster Quick Guard users. Um, but other than that, we compared this one to Toxicroak. Um, I think again this comparison to me really depends because like the stats, it's faster and does more damage. Um, but Toxicroak gets such good support moves and stuff like Feint and Quick Guard and stuff like that. So again, I think it's just going to kind of come down to what it gets. What do you think?
Yeah, well, for me, I picked Mienshao as the comparison.
Yeah.
It's faster and does more damage than Mienshao as well, and it's a bit bulkier than Mienshao, so it seems better all around. But what makes Mienshao good is its support move pool. So if it gets a support move pool like Mienshao, then I think this thing we are looking at a potential fairly high tier Pokemon like a Mienshao. That could push into tier 2 in a lot of current league structures. But if you don't get those support move pools, I think it's struggling to keep up as just an offensive option.
Yeah, I generally agree with that.
Yeah, and the quad weakness to Psychic doesn't help either. But
Yeah.
moving on from there, let's look at one of the coolest designed Pokemon, and that's Zoroark-H. Why don't you break this one down for us?
Yeah, so I'm pretty excited about this one. It's normal Ghost type, which is pretty crazy because it only has one weakness to Dark, and it has 3 immunities to Ghost, Normal, and Fighting, which is pretty good. Um, it gets so as you can see, its stats base 110 speed and 125 special attack is pretty crazy. Obviously, it's made of paper, but it's got really nice offensive stats. And then it gets stuff like Shadow Sneak. Its signature move, Bitter Malice, it's a ghost type move, base 60. Uh, has a 30% chance to inflict Frostbite, which is they replace Frost Freeze with Frostbite in this game. But this is also like Infernal Parade. It doubles if the target has a status condition. That seems to be a theme, I guess, that I didn't realize till just now. Um, but I think this Mon is going to kind of just do some damage. I think Illusion is like a really cool mind game thing. Um,
Okay,
yeah,
but
I don't
you know
have
why
a
the
ton of.
illusion on this Pokemon is so much better than the illusion on base Zoroark?
What's
Because it's
that?
immune to fake out. Imagine you're trying to fake out an opposing
Uh,
Pokemon and it just fails, and then they taunt whatever you didn't want taunted, or they launch a Shadow Ball at something. Like, illusion
yeah,
immune
that's
to
true.
fake out is going to be the worst mind game to play in draft, and you're just going to be able to build around it every week. That they don't know if fake out's actually going to be able to hit whatever's on the field. And that's something I really love about the Zoroark when you compare it to base Zoroark. Uh, Otherwise,
Yeah,
it's
I'll
pretty
talk about
similar.
it. Yeah. They're not super different, but um, I think Ghost. I mean, Ghost and Dark, like offensive coverage wise, are about the same. Um, but I think obviously the typing on this one's way better. Um, I actually hadn't thought about the fake out immunity, but I had just thought about the fact that like it's not prankster illusion with 3 immunities, which is like gives it
Hmm.
a lot of cool potential partners. Like, um, I believe I was talking to Gumi about it, and I think he mentioned Bisharp could be cool. Um, like you have like, is it Bisharp or is it Zoroark? Do I launch a fighting move and risk that it's not going to hit it? Do I risk shoot it off a dark move and have it not be effective? I think it's got a lot more like interesting partners because of that as well.
Hmm.
And honestly, the other thing too is like what they took. I think the stat changes on this Zoroark are just like objectively better because 60-60-60 for all its bulk versus 55-60-60 is like, oh well, you know, it's gonna
Hmm.
die to anything anyway. So adding 5 to special attack and speed, I think, is really good as well.
Yeah, it makes it very comparable with another, pretty frequent glass cannon ghost type special attacker in this Gengar, but I would argue that this Zoroark is almost a strict upgrade just because of the mind games and the additional immunities. Like, it's not weak to ghost type attacks. Its only weakness, I think, is dark, which
Yep,
is
only with
phenomenal. Like, I think it's a strict upgrade over your Gengar, and Gengar is generally a mainstay in terms of high level draft. So I have big expectations for this thing in draft formats.
Yeah, it'll also be really cool, like, if we see this Zoroark get, like, Will-O-Wisp or something, like a lot of ghosts, like Gengar does, that could be really good. It also gets Snarl, right?
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah, I did. But yeah, I'm pretty excited to see what this mon can do.
Yeah, but let's move on, and I'm going to talk a bit about Enamorus-I. This is the weirdest Pokemon in this game. It's the new Genie. It's a fairy flying type. It's got massive base stats. It can have healer or contrary. Normally, you think contrary is going to be the best because it can, if you're lowering an attack or a stat, it's going to get buffed instead. But in a max format, it can't use something like Max Airstream because it would be lowering its own speed. And then if you look at its signature move, Springtide Storm, uh, that in its incarnate form has the chance to give you an Omni boost 30% of the time, which would be an Omni debuff 30% of the time if you're running contrary. So you want to run healer on it more likely than not, which is just like no ability at all. But even without an ability, its stats are just so good. Like, it's got decent bulk, it's gonna be a pretty good physical attacker, and it's got the coverage to do it. And beyond that, it can be a very, very powerful special attacker as well. Like, I don't know how good this thing is, but I think it's gonna be pretty good. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm on the same on the same boat as you. It gets a really interesting new move called Power Shift, which I don't know that this mon would use, but I want to point this out just because I think it's a cool move. So I know that the mechanics of Legends, I read at least on like a leaks page where offense and defense are just lumped together as like two stats instead of like physical and special being separated. Um, so it could translate differently, but it basically switches the user's offense and defensive stats. Which, this mon probably isn't going to use that, but I just wanted to point out because I think it'll be cool. But yeah, I mean, this thing is really, I think, it has the potential to be really, really cool. Like it gets great coverage. Does it not get a flying move?
Um, I didn't think about that, but I don't think I wrote one down, and I feel like I would have put anyone down. Maybe.
Yeah. Let me
Yeah,
look here.
pull that up. That's a excellent question. While you're pulling that up, I'm going to talk about Togekiss, which is a comp for it. It doesn't get follow
does
lead,
not.
obviously, but offensively it compares very well to Togekiss, except it doesn't get a flying move, apparently.
Yeah, it does not, sadly.
Okay,
Probably
yeah.
will, but
Yeah.
it doesn't now.
In transfer, it likely will. Speaking of Togekiss gets Moonblast, which is an entirely separate conversation, but that's good for it.
Yeah,
But
crazy.
offensively, this thing can go toe-to-toe with Togekiss, which isn't exactly what Togekiss is always going to be known for, but I think it's something worth noting on the Enamorus. But like all genies, it has an incarnate form and a Therian form, and this Therian form is even weirder. So why don't you tell us what this Therian form does?
Yeah, I'm actually. I'll just say I'm actually a fan of the design. I think the Chimera concept is kind of
Oh,
cool.
I love the design.
It is still weird looking. So it's also fairy flying and it gets overcoat, which is fine. It's not incredible, I don't think, but it's definitely not like useless either. Um, overcoat in some matchups is just like super value. Um, but yeah, it's same move pool. But its stats are kind of like rearranged. So it's still got the base 135 special attack and 115 attack, which I think is pretty huge. But its bulk now is 74 and then 110 defense and 100 spadef. And the 46 speed tier is like all right. It'll be pretty good under Trick Room. Um, but the bulk is just I think the bulk is amazing. Like you're gonna be able to calc this thing to live a lot.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think that with that speed tier, it could be a functional Trick Room attacker that completely ignores Rage Powder, so Follow Me is the only redirection that you can hit it with.
Yep.
And I think offensively it compares at least semi-favorably to Marowak-Alola while being much bulkier at a similar speed tier. So I think that this might be the baseline for the Enamorus, if it gets the kind of coverage we think it's going to get, that Alola Marowak, which can function under Tailwind or Trick Room, is sort of what we're going to be looking at for Enamorus as well.
Yep, I could generally agree. I mean, it's not a perfect comparison, but I think Enamorus is pretty hard to like compare to current Mons.
Yes.
But yeah, I think it's gonna be pretty cool. Like even if even if its contrary sets don't turn out working with the other form, or if Overcoat's just kind of meh with it, like it's still just got amazing base stats and a good typing and
Mm-hmm.
good coverage. So like at the very least, especially in a max format, it's gonna do stuff.
Assuming it's a flying type move, yes. But
Right. Which to be fair, Enamorus-T, if you're running it under Trick Room, you might not even want to run Airstream, but you definitely want the option.
yeah, I can agree with that. But let's go ahead and look at Goodra.
Oh boy.
I wasn't fully convinced on Goodra, but I'm becoming more convinced on it. It's a Dragon Steel type with Sap Sipper, Overcoat, and Gooey. It's got a bunch of great moves. Coverage basically on both physical and special side with every typing you could want, and a signature move Shelter that raises its defenses and makes it harder to hit as well.
Yeah, increases evasion.
This thing is just so bulky, and its offenses are okay, they're not great, but if you put a weakness policy on this thing and max it, it's never dying, and it's going to kill a lot of things. What do you think about Goodra?
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to say about this Mon. Like, you could literally put this Mon in the game with its current move pool, and it's gonna do well. Like, I think a big thing to note is the 30-point difference in defense between it and its base form. I think that's like a problem Goodra has sometimes is like the physical bulk is relatively lackluster. Also, you get stab steel spikes with this, which is really cool. I think this Mon is going to do pretty well. I don't think it's going to be like, top tier 1 craziness, but I think in a max format, this thing is very good. In a non-max format, probably not quite as good.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I think in a max format, it actually compares at least decently to Metagross. It doesn't have the same level of offenses, but it is bulkier on the physical side than Metagross is on the special side, and it is so much bulkier on the special side than Metagross is on the physical side.
Yep.
And if you can get a weakness policy triggered, like yes, you're weaker to opponents lowering your stats. So I still think Metagross is better, but like a big bulky steel weakness policy sweeper, I think Goodra could fit the bill in a similar way to Metagross.
Yeah, I think you also get more like having it weak to fighting and ground actually gives you better weakness policy procs probably because you can do like Mach Punch or Vacuum Wave, which get a little more distribution than Shadow Sneak. I guess Bulldoze is pretty good on Metagross, but I think at least gives it a little bit of like a difference between them. But
yeah, I can see that as well. But why don't you tell us a little bit about Kleavor?
all right. So Kleavor is the new Scyther evolution in this game. It's Bug Rock type. Gets Swarm, Sheer Force, and Steadfast. As you can see, gets some pretty good physical moves. And as you can see here, base 135 attack with Sheer Force is going to be crazy. Like, that is going to... Like, we talked about how good Nidoking is, and then we talked about how good the new Braviary is with base 112. This thing has base 135. Granted, it's like The its move pool currently doesn't make a ton of use out of Sheer Force other than Rock Slide. But honestly, like this is a mon that doesn't need Sheer Force to do damage. Like that's like something with like Nidoking. If you're running a special set, you're kind of only running. I mean, you're only gonna run Sheer Force boosted moves because you need them to hit calcs. But this mon can just run X Scissor and hit stuff. It's gonna need some speed control. At base 85 speed, like it's gonna need Tailwind. It's really good Scarf tier. But yeah, what do you think of this one, Dan?
I mean, I'm just going to move to the comp. It hits
Yes.
harder, theoretically, than a Haxorus does with 147 attack. You need to have more support around it because its speed tier is considerably worse. Like 97 to 85 is a huge difference, and its bulk isn't great, but it's comparable at least. So I just think that this thing's going to be, with speed control, a great late game cleaner. You can get double KOs with Rock Side pretty easily if it gets some other moves that have some secondary effects. If you can keep using that Sheer Force option, this thing's just going to hit and hit hard. I think you're right. Tailwind and Scarf are the two most likely options for it.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
we did. I actually did forget to mention its new move.
Stone Axe.
Um, yeah, it just 65 power, 90 accuracy. It has a +1 crit rate, and it leaves stone splinters behind that continue to damage the target for several turns. So looks like maybe something like Ceaseless Edge,
Mm-hmm.
which which I know they changed. I know they changed. Did they change Stealth Rocks to do damage, or was that this move that everyone thought was Stealth Rocks?
It might have been this move. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head, but also remember with
Oh
Sheer
no,
Force,
they
it might not work.
right. Well, yeah. Uh, I think it would because Sheer Force removes like secondary effects that say like May, right? I don't think. Ah,
I don't actually
I
know.
don't actually know. Like, would Sheer Force boost Mystical Fire?
I believe so. Because I was hit
Uh,
by a Nidoqueen using Icy Wind and my speed didn't drop.
right. Yeah, that's a good point.
But I guess that's something we'll find out. But
Yeah.
speaking of dropping abilities or dropping stats, we've got Hisuian Arcanine next.
All right.
First of all, top tier design. Like, this thing looks really cool. It's a fire rock type with Intimidate, Flash Fire, Justified. Lots of great coverage, like you'd expect from Arcanine. Also gets Rock Slide, Aerial Ace. It's just got really good coverage. Its stat trade-offs from regular Arcanine are a bit less speed, a bit less special attack, a bit more bulk, a bit more physical attack, but this thing's just worse than Arcanine because of the typing, right? Like, I'm not missing anything. Becoming quad weak to ground, quad weak to water, and also getting a fighting type weakness, like, and only being hit neutral by grass instead of resisting it, like, this just gets worse, right? There's nothing that
Yeah,
could make this
no,
better.
you're not missing anything. This is this is a lot worse in my opinion. Uh, yeah, I don't even think the stat changes are like really that good for it either. I just think in general I mean, I think all you're really getting over normal Arcanine is a Rock Stab, which is like, eh, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see this thing being better than Arcanine in any way.
Okay. Well, I guess that one was pretty close. Like,
Yeah,
it's probably going to be like a mid-tier Pokemon. Like, don't think this is bottom tier or anything, but like, if you think this is going to be just another Arcanine, you're sorely mistaken. But another Intimidate option that's new that I'm much higher on is Overqwil, but I'll let you take this one first.
yeah. So Overqwil, I also am pretty high on. I think he's really cool. So, um, he is the evolution of Hisuian Quillfish, which we didn't cover because it's just kind of bad. But so it's Dark Poison type, which is amazing because it only has one weakness to ground, and that's it. Which is a great typing. The only reason we've got like what Drapion and Skuntank, and the only reason those don't see play is because they're just kind of bad outside of their typings. Um, well, they're like mid tiers, but besides the point. I really, really like that this has Swift Swim and Intimidate. Like, obviously I don't think you're ever running Poison Point, but like having that option I think is cool. I also really like that this is one of the only Swift swimmers that doesn't overlap typings with like another water type, like with a rain setter. Um, like what, like this Armaldo and Beartic or something.
Mhm.
I think this could be really cool. Base 115 attack is like pretty good, especially compared to like a lot of other rain sweepers. That's pretty comparable. I will say not having it's interesting, right? Because it gets poison and dark stab. Uh, assuming it gets like a good, well, it gets Aqua Tail, but like assuming like let's say it gets Liquidation or something, like your water type move isn't going to hit as hard, but you're essentially getting 3 stabs in rain, which might be better depending on how you look at it. Um, but also like this thing is going to be relatively bulky with Intimidate too, and it doesn't get a physical dark move now, but I would assume it will in the future, hopefully. What do you think of this one?
So I'm actually just going to move into the comps with it because I'm a big
Yeah.
fan of Overqwil, and I'll tell you why. First, if you look at it next to Arcanine as an Intimidator, uh, it's not necessarily better, but it's also not necessarily worse as just an Intimidator. So it can be a really good defensive pivot because Dark Poison is a really good defensive typing. You can have it Intimidate, you can make this thing pretty bulky, it can survive a lot of things, maybe give it an Assault Vest, and it compares favorably to Arcanine. But it's also got that secondary Swift Swim mode, which, because it's an off-type Swift Swimmer, I think it compares favorably to this Leafeon. It's got similar bulk once you take into account the Intimidate. It hits a little bit harder, and it's an off-type physical Weather Sweeper, which I think the duality, the roll compression of Overqwil, that lets it do rolls that are similar to both an Arcanine and sort of like a mid-tier Weather Sweeper like a Leafeon, really just put this thing over the edge for me, and I think it's going to be one of the best Pokemon in draft that's new in this game, because I think it can just do so much. And it does it all at a decently high level. Part of what makes Arcanine great is its roll compression, but this has even more roll compression than an Arcanine, arguably. But yeah, what do you think about the comps I have for the Overqwil?
Yeah, I think you're pretty much spot on. It still gets acid spray, which is great. So you can and icy wind, so like it gets pretty similar moveset to like Quillfish, like base Quillfish, and its stats are obviously way better. But also like you can run this as a even a range support set. Like if you know you can if you have I mean, like the range setters available aren't like super offensive, right? But even something like a Pelipper with Hurricane next to Acid Spray Overqwil, like not only are you like, you know, you're lowering special defense for like other things to switch in, but Hurricane's gonna, so even things
Mhm.
like that, I think make this mon really interesting. Just I think like even with this limited move pool we see now, it can already do a lot. If it gets like a move like Throat Chop or Night Slash or something like that, I think that'll even be even better. But yeah, I'm also pretty convinced that this mon will have some usage.
Yeah, well, that is the last of the new Pokemon in
You actually, you know what I just realized, Dan?
what?
We we missed the new Avalugg and the Wardeer.
Avalugg doesn't matter. Wordier has Intimidate and isn't as good as these Pokemon. The end.
That is true. I will say Avalugg gets Ice Shock now.
Yeah, Avalugg
Doesn't
doesn't
make it
matter.
any better.
No, because it gets a Rock type, it gets considerably worse. But
They did Avalugg so dirty. They made it faster too. Like why?
yeah,
Anyway,
we don't need to talk about it. That was a travesty. But thank you guys for watching our breakdown. Any last thoughts, Sam, before we wrap it up?
no, yeah. Thanks for watching, everyone. Thanks for having me on, Dan. And I'm really excited to play this game and hopefully see how these mons get integrated into whatever format they're integrated into in the future.
Yep, absolutely. Well, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you guys next time. Bye.